Okay, so Maimonides part 2. Okay, so last time we talked about, yes, we talked about divine providence, right? Now we remember that divine providence has nothing to do with God giving you stuff, right? Or solving your problems, or intervening in your life, or saving you, right? Divine providence for Maimonides is divine clarity, divine wisdom, right? Divine understanding, divine light, which when you receive it, you can then yourself get out of suffering, right? Make sure you had this point down because it's very important, right? So we saw that this divine providence is accessed through the organ, right, of our reason. So our reason is the kind of bridge or vessel or gateway to this divine light. And remember, Maimonides says that divine providence is given in proportion to our reason, right? And then we talked about how everyone has reason, and yet not everybody seems to have equal access. There's still a lot of us messing up our lives, right? Who don't seem to have divine wisdom or divine lights, right? And so the problem is not that some of us have reason and some of us don't. The issue is that some of us have small reason, some of us have cluttered reason. And this is why we cannot receive enough of the light, right? So 2 problems, let me write it in the chat. Problem number 1, a cluttered reason, where you're full of, right, prejudices, right, preconceptions, your own or representations, right? You already know, or you think you know, right? And so you're full of this kind of prejudices and preconceptions of what you should do, and you're not ready to receive, right, new wisdom. Second thing is a narrow reason, right? So this means that it's small, it hasn't, I'll put it in the quotation marks, it hasn't traveled, right? It's provincial, right? It's narrow-minded, right? That's what it is. So these are the 2 main problems, right? That we have with our own mind, which is keeping us from truly receiving the divine light, right? And so today, finally, we're going to figure out how to purify our reason, how to prepare our vessel so that we can really receive the divine light and therefore pull ourselves out of our painful situations. So let's go to page, I think it's 55, let me check. No, not 55, 57. Let's go to 57. Everybody on page 57, put your hand in the screen if you're there. Okay, great. Okay, page 57, second paragraph. And we're going to read there 4 steps of purification of reason. Okay. So beginning second paragraph, such matters to which, who is there? Put your hand in the screen. Such matters, okay. Such matters to which this kind of confusion applies are very common in metaphysics. Okay, so he's saying when it comes to the spiritual life, there's a lot of confusion. And the main reason is that we are cluttered or narrow. And that's why you have he believes that's why there's so many different views of God, so many different views of what God wants us to do. Because our minds are so cluttered, and so we're not receiving proper guidance, and we have ambiguous, confused notions of who God is and how we should live, right? So that's why he says, right, metaphysics. There's always confusion in metaphysics, less in natural science and none in mathematical sciences, right? So then he quotes a philosopher of his time. He says, according to Alexander of Aphrodisias, the causes of differences of opinions are 3. Okay, now he's going to look at 3 problems with reason that we need to purify. First one, what is it? Can anyone tell me? What's the first problem that we encounter that keeps us from receiving the divine light? What do you see? Yes, Al-Hadai.
Power and control.
Okay, very good, right? So number 1, I'll put in the chat, right? The lust for control. Okay, so let's look at what that means with regards to divine providence. What does it mean when you want to control? your spiritual journey, right? What does it mean when you want to control God? Kind of like Job, right? Job, in a way, if you recall, wanted to control God, right? So he had this view, God is like this, therefore I have to do this, right? This view of a predictable God, right? And in doing so, he was missing the true God, right? God had to really break him open so that he could see. So Job, in a way, was stuck in this view of who God is and what he's supposed to do. And this is where a lot of us stumble. Okay, let me say it again, right? Job was stuck in this narrow view of who God is and what he needed to do to please God, right? And he couldn't see anything else. And he had expectations of how God was supposed to act. That's why he was so angry when God punished or, caused or allowed the suffering, right? He had this view, God is supposed to be like this. And if he's not like this, what the hell, right? So this is where a lot of us stumble, right? And I've heard so many stories, right? You begin, you believe, you're faithful, and then a tragedy hits your life, right? And now you're like, I don't believe in a God like that. I did not expect God to allow, my grandmother to die, or to allow me to get this sick, or to allow me to, lose this home, or lose this partner. What kind of God is this? This is not the God that I deserve or the God that I expect, right? So we have expectations on God, right? We set expectations on God, and when God doesn't fulfill, we dump him like a bad boyfriend, right? Or girlfriend. So this is the first thing. What we're learning here is to allow ourselves to be challenged by God, right? This is what Job eventually was able to do, right? Allow ourselves to be challenged, be brought out of our comfort zone, right? And encounter a God who doesn't fit within our expectations, right? This is the first issue, right? Everybody with me? Put your hand in the screen if you're following, right? Kind of what I'm saying. Okay, great. So that's the first thing, right? We expect God to act a certain way, and when he doesn't deliver, we dump him or we get angry, right? And what we're learning here is that when it comes to the spiritual journey, we have to, in a way, relinquish control of how God will come to us, what he will teach us, what will happen in our lives, kind of relinquish control and allow ourselves to be challenged, right? Let me say that again, right? What we're invited to do here is relinquish control on how our lives should go, right? Whether we suffer this or that, right? And simply allow ourselves to be challenged and our vision of God to be broadened, right? This is the most difficult, is to let go of our expectations of who God is supposed to be and simply allow what comes into our lives to teach us, right? To broaden us, to expand us. Okay, that's number one. Now, what's the second one? What do you read there for the second one? We're still on the same page, right after lust.
Subtly and profundity of the subject.
Yes, very good, right? Jasper. So let me write this down. Number 2, subtlety, which I don't know how to write. Profundity of the subject. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. The second stumbling block, right, to preparing our minds, right? So the first one is to get rid of expectations and allow God to reveal himself as he chooses, right? So let me say that again. The first one is get rid of expectations, allow God to reveal himself as he chooses, allow life to hit us in the way that it does, receive, right, the challenges that come. Second one, realize that things are not as they seem, right? In other words, things are more profound than they seem. In other words, the spiritual truth or divine providence or anything that has to do with the life of the spirit is deeper or broader than we can right now see, right? And so if it is deeper and broader, what must we do in order to access and to see everything in its depth or breadth? What do you think is needed? Suppose your mind is not seeing the whole thing. What do you need to do with your mind? You're here, you're only seeing this, you're not seeing the depth, you're not seeing the subtlety, the profundity. What do you need to do? What's the advice?
Expand your mind?
Yes, please raise your hands, guys. Al-Hadai, you want to add? Was that Islam? Who was that who just spoke? So I know who you are.
Me, Miguel.
Ah, Miguel. Colon?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Colon. Yes, raise your hand so I know who you are, because I can't. You come out a voice out of my computer. So I want to be able to know who it is. Al-Hadai, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I was just going to say get out and look at it from a different perspective and look at different things, maybe.
Exactly, right? The second thing that is needed, right, is expand your mind, right? And what did we learn is the best way to do that? We talked about this last time. How is the best way to enlarge and expand your mind so you can see the profundity and the subtlety that you can't see if your mind is like this? What is needed according to Maimonides? Delmas.
We talked about how it needs to be decluttered and it needs to be less rigid. It's like a river that's been blocked by a bunch of blockades. It's been piled up by a bunch of rocks, but you need to declutter it and allow a new perspective to come in. Similar to what Mona had been saying.
Yeah, so you summarized really well the first point, right? Get rid of expectations, clutter, how things should be, agendas, right? That's the clutter. The decluttering is the first point, but the second point has to do more with expanding than decluttering. What do you think is needed to expand or declutter? Rosario?
Doing the things you don't usually do.
Yes, you got it, right? Remember, Maimonides actually suggests, right? He says, anyone who wants to study metaphysics, anyone who wants to study spiritual matters, first has to study, I think he says this somewhere in the text we read even, right? First has to study mathematics, logic, physical sciences, natural science, everything else, right? So that your mind expands and then you come back and now you can see the profundity and the subtlety of the topic, right? You can see more deeply, right? So the second thing we need to learn to do, right, is to be ready, right, to expand our minds through the study of other subjects, right? And Maimonides actually gives us a list, which I don't know, I can't find it yet in this text, but it's somewhere. Anyways, yes, Islam, go ahead.
Were we talking about this last week?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think to add, I think we were talking about it. It was basically studying other things that you find difficult because because there's this principle in life with success and everything with pressure forms diamonds, meaning if you are pressured and it's difficult and it's hard and it's grinding, that means your brain is learning. And if your brain is learning, it's expanding in a way if you study other subjects because they're hard and it creates pressure, which creates something. It makes something that's like really valuable. So
very good.
That's how we can expand our mind. Yeah.
Okay, excellent, right? Exactly, right? Other subjects, they pull your mind. They kind of, they apply pressure to your mind. They refine your mind. It's the difficulty of doing like math problems or learning grammar or, doing things that seem completely useless to your life, right? Trigonometry, statistics, right? But as you're doing it, actually you're expanding your mind, which when you go back to metaphysics or go back to reading spiritual things, you'll see a lot more, right? So that's the second thing that we are advised to do by Maimonides, right? Very good. Any other hands? Okay, good. All right. What is the third one? What do you see there in the text is the third thing we need to do? What's the third obstacle? Ahmad, go ahead.
One's own intellectual incompetence.
Intellectual incompetence. Let's see. I don't have that in my text. Maybe it's your translation. The third, what's the third? He says here the third is, what is it? Do you see it, Ahmed?
It's difficulty in the subject is too difficult for the reader to grapple with.
Okay. That's the second one that we just talked about. What's the next one, Ahmed?
The ignorance of the apprehender.
That's it. Okay, very good. So number 3, ignorance. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit, right? Here's where a lot of people misunderstand Maimonides, right? They say, oh, so Maimonides doesn't think that, common people can ever reach God because they're ignorant and they don't go to school and they don't have, right? So what is he saying here? Only an elite can reach God, right? The thinkers. So we have to understand what he means by ignorance, right? Ignorance for him is nothing to do with, how much learning you have in your mind, right? Ignorance is a kind of intellectual laziness, right? Let me write this down, right? So when he talks about ignorance, he means an intellectual laziness, which actually even someone who's very learned can have this problem, right? So what does it mean to be intellectually lazy? Actually, there's 2 ways to do it, which are opposite, which are forms of intellectual laziness. What does it mean to be intellectually lazy? Does anybody want to try to give me a definition? Ibatulin, go ahead.
I guess never looking from different perspectives on one thing. That's part of it, at least. Like looking at one thing in a very narrow way, only from your perspective and only considering your own perspective and not other people's or just any other type of perspective in general.
Okay, good. So you're not really interested in seeking out new forms. You're complacent in your way of knowing. You don't really, so there's a kind of complacency, right? You're good with what you know. You don't care to know more. We're going to talk about that. Very good. Karuchi, do you want to add?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that maybe he's saying that we take everything at face value. And then we, so for example, I have a 9-year-old nephew who swears that he doesn't like broccoli, but he's never tasted it because he doesn't like the way it looks. So he's not willing to give it a try. Or I have another nephew who's older and, he always says math is too hard. So right away, the challenge of math or the perception that math is challenging doesn't even, open up his opportunity to try. He's like, no, I'm no good at math.
Okay,
so I think, yeah, that taking things at face value. And that's what I was thinking when I read that, that are given to perception. So our perception is if we don't like it, if we know it, if we don't know it, if it doesn't make sense to us, then, it's not for us. So we just stop learning at that point.
Excellent. Very good. So the 2 of you actually came up with the first one. Number 1 way of being intellectually lazy, and I think core is added, right? Not to be a critical thinker, is to simply be comfortable, right? Or complacent, right? In what you know, without ever thinking that there is more. You're like, I know what I know. I've been taught this. This is how I've always lived. I'm good. And you're not ever feeling the urgency to go beyond your own knowledge. This is the first form of laziness, right? Which is what we might call a kind of dogmatic, right, approach to life. I have my knowledge. This is how I've been taught. I'm good. I don't need you, right? I'm satisfied with where I am. In fact, you're wrong, right? That's the first. But there's another one, which is the opposite. Anybody can tell me what is the opposite of being complacent in your knowledge? There's actually an opposite way to be lazy. Who wants to try that one? Karuchi, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, maybe you are ignorant to the fact that you can always learn something new. So in other words, you walk around like you know it all.
So that's still the first one.
Oh.
Right, you're comfortable in what you know. You're not interested in seeking. So that one.
But what I was suggesting is maybe there's sort of an arrogance behind that. But I guess.
Oh yeah. It's all connected.
Yeah.
Arrogance, closed-mindedness. You're happy where you are. Everybody's wrong. But this is different. Ibatulin, do you want to try?
Maybe it's like accepting everything that you're told, or like grasping at any idea that you hear right away. Maybe.
I hadn't thought of it like that, but
almost like a sheep.
Yeah, almost like that.
Yeah, without being critical about it, you're kind of going with whatever is happening. I hadn't thought of it like that, but that's certainly one way you can be intellectually lazy. Let me say the one, or maybe Islam wants to add. Go ahead first. Islam.
I wanted to try the opposite. You said opposite, right? So comfortable, complacent, that's like a first. Okay, that's the first thing, laziness. So the opposite would be that you're not comfortable and you're not complacent. You think that there's way more to know, but maybe you're ignorant because there's so much stuff to know that you don't have to know it.
Ah, you're very close.
Damn.
No, I think you're actually
Almost. We're almost.
Karuchi is struggling to speak. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, now that I think about it, there's an old saying that you're the jack of all trades but the master of none. So maybe you have limited knowledge of a lot of things but not specific knowledge of certain things.
Yeah, that what you're saying makes me think of what who was it? Trying to get your names. Ibatulin just said something similar, right? I like that. I think we can add that one. Let's add that one, right? The jack of all trades. You're kind of just swayed with whatever new trend is happening. You're not choosing, right? And actually, what I'm thinking and what I'm losing everybody's name today. What Islam was saying, right? I think it was Islam. Yeah, is in the same direction. In other words, you become comfortable in your questions and you never try, you give up on finding answers. This is the eternal skeptic. I know you all have friends like that. There's no truth, we can't know. There's no way we can be sure. And they kind of start floating and being complacent there. Like, we can't know anything. There's no truth. There's no point, right? And yes, you're quoting some authors that are going in that direction, Nietzsche, Hume, right? And have, in a way, given up on looking for answers. And that, for Maimonides, is also a type of intellectual laziness, right? So the number 2, right, it would be the eternal skeptic, right? Who ends up saying, right, there is no truth. We can't ever know, so why seek, right? And in a way, they become very comfortable in their questions, right? So the first one is comfortable in their answers. They're like, I know everything, I'm good. The second one is like, we can't know anything, there is no truth. And that is a kind of laziness too, according to Maimonides, because you should be pushing for an answer, right? You should be eternally seeking to go beyond your questions and not start to get comfortable in your questions, right? So 3 ways, right? The drifter, the eternal skeptic, and the dogmatic, right? Or the person complacent in their knowledge, right? The drifter is the one who just goes with whatever trend. That's the 3rd one you guys gave me. I'll put it to the chat since it's a new one, right? The drifter, right? This is the one who never chooses a side, right? Goes with the flow, has no opinion of their own. That's also a kind of laziness, right? Very good. Yes, neutral, as Al-Mulaiki is saying, right? And yes, you can, you can talk about all 3 and you can be all 3 at certain times of your life, right? Very good. Good. So now let's go to the 4th one, which is from Maimonides, actually. Can anyone tell me what is the 4th obstacle, right? So we saw the first one, you're full of expectations how things should go. 2nd one, your mind is too small. 3rd one, you're lazy. 4th one, Karuchi.
So when I read that, I thought he was saying that, actually what he writes is, men have an ingrained love for the things which they are accustomed and are so fond of them that that the Budwans, for instance, in spite of their disorder. So he's basically saying that we don't want to expand out of what we know and what we're comfortable knowing because it creates a sort of discomfort. Yeah, it's like what we've learned through habit and knowledge and all that stuff.
Yes, so that's the 4th one. Let me write it down. Hold on. Okay, number 4, right? Habit, right? Al-Hadai, do you want to add before I comment?
No, I was about to say habits, but that's fine.
Very good, right? Habit. In other words, this is how I was taught. This is how my tradition does it. This is how my religion does it. This is how my culture does it, and I'm used to it, and there's nothing beyond that, right? So what Maimonides is saying, which is very interesting, he's saying, in a way, we have to be ready to leave behind the familiar. If we're not ready to leave behind our homes, right? Our familiar way of thinking, how we were taught by our parents, how we were taught by our religious leaders, how we were taught by our religious community. If we're not able to transcend that and to take a step out and to explore other things, we will always be in a kind of, narrow space, right? He's so very, very, this is the same invitation he's giving us is the invitation that Abraham got, right? Anybody remember You all know Abraham, I think, by now, right? Everybody knows Abraham, hand in the screen. Okay, what was Abraham doing the first time we meet him in the Hebrew Bible? Does anybody remember? What's the first story we have about Abraham? Anybody remember? First time we meet Abraham, he's asked to do something. What is it? Nope, that's later. That's in chapter 22. But in chapter 12, which is the first time, right? Genesis chapter 12 in the Hebrew Bible, right? Delmas, go ahead.
Was it when God told him to pick up his things and go to a foreign country all by himself?
Right, exactly. So this first believer, the first thing he's asked to do, leave your father's household, leave your city, leave all your possessions and go to the land that I will show you, right? If we are not ready to leave our father's household, right? To leave everything that is familiar, everything we have been taught, and go to the land that will be shown to us in our unique, right? Take our unique journey, basically. Choose our unique spiritual path. If we're not ready to do this, we're always gonna be living in a narrow space, right? We're never gonna see the extent. We're never gonna have this, we're never gonna really receive the amount of divine providence we could. We'll get a trickle, we'll get a little bit over there, right? Sitting in the church, sitting in the synagogue with all our family and friends, we'll always get a little bit, but we could get so much more if we had the courage to step out. Now, it doesn't mean, of course, you stay out, right? Maimonides stepped out and came back, right? Maimonides went, studied Greek, studied Aristotle, studied Averroes, right? And eventually came back and became one of the most prominent rabbis in the Jewish community, right? So it's not an invitation to leave for good. Some of us will have to, but some of us can come back. But we have to leave at some point, right? There has to be a journey out of the familiar for us to really encounter the God that is our God, right? Have you ever wondered, this is something that I thought about recently. In the Hebrew Bible, they always, when God introduces himself, he always says, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. Why? Why doesn't he just say, I'm the God of Abraham? Anybody want to give me an answer? Why he says the God of Abraham and the God of Jacob and the God of Isaac? Why is he taking the time to list that he's the God of these three, not just, why doesn't he just say, I am God? Right? Can anyone give me an interpretation? Ahmad, go ahead.
They all forged their own path.
Yes, they all had a unique experience of God, and all of them in a way encountered their unique, right, had their unique encounter on the path of exile, right? They had to leave. Abraham had to leave his home. Isaac had to separate from Abraham. We know that after he was almost sacrificed, he left. He went and lived somewhere else, right? And Jacob, of course, we know the story when he cheated his brother out of his inheritance, he fled, right? Anytime you want to have a unique experience of God and not just a collective experience of God, you have to have the courage to journey in that way, away from the household, right? That's what Maimonides is saying. Are we ready for this? To the extent that we're ready for this, we will receive more or less divine providence. Ahmad, you still have a question? Ahmad, are you there? No. Yes? No more hand. Okay, very good. Okay, excellent. Now, there is one more, which is not in this passage, but which Maimonides also says is important to prepare the mind, right? And this is actually on page 61. So go with me to page 61. And one of you already mentioned this actually in the chat. It's funny. I was laughing. Where is it? I'm trying to find it. Yes, Al-Mulaiki, you're the one who mentioned it. Go to the last paragraph of 61. The fourth reason, this is another, he's listing another set of reasons, but it's connected to what we're doing. How many of you are there? Put your hand. The fourth reason, page 61. Okay. So he says this, right? Still connected to expanding the mind, right? Go to the next sentence. The attainment of true intellectual values, right? This is really how to prepare the mind. That is perfect intellectual ideas is impossible, he says, right? You cannot, your mind cannot be prepared unless right? It is except unless you are a man whose moral character is properly trained and who possesses dignity and balance. So in other words, this is no more a purification of the intellect. This is a purification of your character, your personality, the way you inhabit the world, right? So what we're learning here is that to be truly intellectual, you also need to be a good person. And we like you. Do you want to elaborate since you're the one who brought it up?
Even in the text, it says, I forgot what page was it. It says, moral preparation is necessary for a man to be thoroughly upright and perfect.
Yeah, where is that? I like your book better than mine.
I forgot what.
Yes, there's somewhere.
I forgot what page is it, but I just wrote it down. That what really brought my attention.
Yeah, I mean that's I think that's somewhere in the text, right? But this is the one I found, but it's saying the same thing. Absolutely, Amulaki, right?
Yeah.
Moral preparation. It's not enough.
Page 62.
Oh, thank you.
First
Yes.
full paragraph.
Very good, Jesper. Let's see. Everybody go to 62. Yes, for a second paragraph. Everybody underline this, right? Moral preparation is necessary for a man to be thoroughly upright and perfect. This is so fascinating, right? Because we're used to thinking, if you're just intelligent, you're fine. You don't need anything else. You will have amazing revelations, right? For spiritual matters is different. You also have to be a good person, right? Even if your mind is all prepared, uncluttered, you're ready to move forward, you can leave behind everything, you have no prejudices, you've studied all the other topics, your mind is, if you're not a good person, if you have not refined yourself morally, if you have not attained moral perfection, you will still be held back on the spiritual journey. I wonder why. Anybody know why this might be the case? Why is it that if we're not a morally upright person, we'll be held back on this intellectual journey? Anybody want to comment on that? Islam, go ahead. Islam, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm sorry that I guess it's just me, but I think it's important because there's like two things. One, we get our morals from God, or we get our morals from people. So generally, it's like a mix or either or. There's always a spectrum, and our own intellect and reason decides that, I think. But I don't know. I think it's really important because if you're not a morally upright person, let's say if your morals come from the people, or like, for example, the Constitution, like if you're not following that, the people around you are gonna like look. I know it's not about how bad you look, but the people around you are gonna despise you if you're not morally upright and listening to like what's normal at the time. So that's just my idea of why it's important or good to be morally good.
Yes,
or
absolutely.
Strike importance.
How can you be a guide, right? If you're, your life is a mess. Absolutely. Jesper, do you want to add?
I actually had a question. Continuing to look down the page, I actually noted it that he had a fifth reason.
Okay. What is it?
What he was talking about, basically like you can't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
With your family and stuff either.
Yeah, he does say that, if you really want to get to a high level, you don't marry. Don't have kids. You don't have time for that, right? So yeah, I mean, in a way, but I think what he would suggest, especially as a Jewish rabbi, right? He would say, even if you have kids and so forth, have to put some time into the study, right? And I think even today, if you live in Queens, right? They have houses of study that are open late at night for people who work during the day so they can go study after work, right? So, but yes, if you have a wife and children, it's not great for them, right? You have to go to study at night and work during the day. And Maimonides is aware of that. Karuchi.
Yeah, Professor, I had a question. If you look at that paragraph with moral preparation, he says, for this reason alone, one should not teach this subject to the young. And when I read that, what does he mean by young? Does he mean little children, adolescents? Because, and this is my psychology brain, but you know, as we know, like cognitive, behavioral, emotional development, the formation of self, all of that stuff happens during the adolescent years. And that's when habits start to form. That's when, you know, isms start to be woven into the fabric of who a person is and their identity. This is where we learn the behavior that we see around us. So if he's talking about moral preparation and moral upbringing, you know, or trying to create this moral identity, wouldn't you want to instill that at a younger age so that is already there when they venture out or step out, as he suggests, or travel on or expand their mind or what have you? So I don't know, maybe I read that wrong, but that was just a question that I had. I kind of, that was one of my critiques in my writing. I said that doesn't really make sense, you know. And then if we're talking about, you know, the occupation of the body, you know, adolescence and hormones and things like that, like, you know,
Yeah.
So
Yes, a very excellent point. Actually, what he's saying is that you should not teach metaphysics to the young, right? Why? Precisely because morally they're yet unformed. Why? Because they have no self-control. What he means by moral preparation is the ability to control yourself, right? Control your passions, right? So the young, we know, this is exactly what they can't do, right? If they want to get angry, they'll punch the wall, right? If they want to take something, they'll take it, right? So this is why he's saying moral preparation is needed, especially for the young, but that's why the young cannot study metaphysics, because they're still don't have self-control. So the last point, right, the fifth point is the moral preparation, and now we know a little more what it means thanks to Carucci, which is a self-control, right? If you're not able to control yourself, you're not ready to study metaphysics. Why? Because you, in a way, you'll read the text through your confused, chaotic mind, right? And you won't see what actually is happening. So we first have to learn to be in balance, to be in control, to be, he talks also about the way we eat, the way we exercise, right? All of this is taking part, right? We have to be physically at the utmost, right? And then we're ready to study metaphysics, right? Carucci, do you want to add?
Oh yeah, so again, from a psychology perspective, if metaphysics is in fact the, you know, branch of philosophy that deals with being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, space, isn't that when all of this stuff starts to happen in the brain during the adolescent years? Like, who am I? What do I, you know, what is my identity amongst my peers? What, you know, what social constructs do I subscribe to? Which do I reject? So on and so forth. So I don't know how the two go hand in hand. Maybe I'm off base, but it, you know, and I'm not arguing against what Maimonides is saying. I'm just asking for a little guidance there, because I think it, to me, it's a little disconnected.
Yes, well, I think metaphysics for Maimonides is really the study of the divine attributes, right? So what you're talking about is the development of the self in community, morals. This should all be taught, right? Psychology, ethics, right? All of this is not metaphysics, right? This is morality. When you're finally learned how to relate to each other, how to control yourself, how to relate, how to even get married, right? Maimonides is saying a lot of, in the Jewish tradition, you couldn't become a rabbi until you had known a woman, because you don't know anything until you've known that, according to them, right? So once you've had this moral upbringing where you control yourself, you know how to relate to other people, now you're ready to get into the higher levels, which is the knowledge of God, right? Metaphysics is strictly the knowledge of God. But you can't know God, and this is very profound, and thank you for leading me there, right? You can't know God if you don't know how to know people, right? If you're not able to relate to people, you can't ever relate to God. So morality, which is the art of relating to people, right? Let me write this down, right? This is interesting. Morality, we can also see it as the art of relating to people, right? Unless we know how to relate to each other, right? We can't relate to God, right? So first learn to relate to people. Have a wife, have children, have disciples, have a trade, be in society, learn how to be with people, how to be forgiving, how to be compassionate, how to be gracious, how to be self-controlled. Now you're ready for the higher study of God, right? Or to relate to God. Thank you for, I'm clearer. Are you clearer, Carucci?
Yes, yes. And I think some of our politicians should take this class.
Oh my God, yes. Yes, how can you be a good politician if your own house is a mess, right? First clean up your home and then come clean up the country. Absolutely, I agree with you. Excellent, that was nice. Okay, Islam, thank you for the political. Very good. Okay, so now you know, right? This was extremely valuable information, right? If you want to access this divine light, there are 5 things you have to do, right? First of all, strip your mind of expectations of how things should go. Be open for whatever experience comes your way. Receive the challenges that life brings you, like Job, right? Learn to receive instead of pushing back, right? Receive the challenges that life bring you so that you can expand your consciousness, right? Number 2, what was it? Now I'm having a, I'm losing my mind. What's number 2? Yeah. Expand your mind, right? The topic is vast. The topic is broad. Learn other things, travel, read other things, get out of, learn other topics. Number 3, I'm losing it. Number three. Yeah. Don't be lazy. Continuously seek. Don't become complacent. Number 4, be ready to leave behind your comfort zone, leave behind what you've always known, right? In order to have a unique encounter with God and not just a collective encounter. Of course, you can encounter God in the church, in the synagogue. It's a collective encounter, but to have a unique encounter, you have to be ready to step out, right? And number 5, moral preparation. Learn to relate, learn to control yourself. Develop the virtues that make you a pleasant human being. And then you can begin the study of Metta. You will receive a lot more, right? You're ready to receive this powerful influx of divine providence. So number 4 was habit. And this is where we are, and there are 5 points, yes. Number 4 is habit, which is be willing to leave behind everything you've been taught, everything you know, your community, right? In order to have a unique journey. Right, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Everyone has their own journey. And the God of Jasper, of Karachi, of Islam, right? It should be like that, right? It shouldn't be the God of my parents. It should be the God of Myra, of Pelico, of, Rosario. Unique experience, right? That's the 4th one. And then the last one is work on yourself. Work on your relationships. This is part of the preparation, right? Mental preparation requires that you are existentially well, right? To be really smart, you have to be good. This is so interesting, right? Let me say it again, right? This is a great quote, really smart. It's not well said, but you have to be good. Let me close on this quote by Pablo Casals. Pablo Casals was a famous cellist. He played the cello, very famous musician from Spain. And he was once asked, what is the secret to become a good musician, right? And he simply answered this. He said, you want to be a good musician? Become a good person, right? This is what Maimonides is saying. You want to be an amazing theologian? You want to have an amazing journey with God? You want to really pierce the mysteries of the universe? Become a good person, right? That's what the 5th one is saying. You want to be an amazing scientist? You want to be an amazing doctor? You want to be an amazing artist? Become a good person, right? This is really the key, and really piercing beyond the average. If you're a good person, whatever you do will be better than average, right? Okay, any last questions? Great. Okay, so we'll conclude here. I'll stop the recording.